I'm Carl Arrindell and you're watching In Focus. Now I'm delighted to be joined today by the Metropolitan Police former Deputy Assistant Commissioner, Brian Paddick. Brian Paddick has spent the majority of his career, and that's over 30 years in the Metropolitan Police, rising to the illustrious rank of Deputy Assistant Police Commissioner before his retirement in May 2007. He caught the headlines in 2000 when, as police commander in the London Borough of Lambeth, he instructed his police officers not to arrest or charge people found with cannabis so that they could focus more on crimes that were affecting the quality of life in the borough. He was the Liberal Democrat candidate for mayor in 2008, and he is standing again as their candidate in this week's elections. His face will of course be familiar to many of you as he regularly appears on Islam Channel. Brian Paddick, Assalamu alaikum, welcome to Islam Channel.
Thank you.
Now, the cancerous growth of Islamophobia, an issue that is obviously important to the Muslim community, a growth that has been Europe-wide and resulted in some of the most repressive measures and government rhetoric against Muslims, asylum seekers, immigrants and indeed their offspring. Now, Prime Ministers, including our own, continue to blame the breakdown in society as a consequence of multiculturalism, and even senior politicians in France, Netherlands, Denmark, UK speak of the alien values. The brutality of the Anders Breivik killings in Norway last summer seems not to have tempered that rhetoric. It's the fact that London, the capital city in England, remains a hotbed for the activities of some of the far-right groups, some of which have been cited by Breivik as his inspiration. What should the Mayor of London be doing to tackle this problem? Should, in your opinion, such groups have been given sanction to march with their unsavoury messages into the heart of Muslim communities in order to stir up racial tension and break down cohesion?
The Mayor of London has a leadership role to make sure that what is emphasised is the common humanity that people have rather than the differences. And therefore a mayor who celebrates one religion over another or one group of people over another, I think is likely to be more divisive rather than bringing people together. But having said that, I mean, we should be intolerant of those who are prejudiced and who discriminate, whether they are discriminating against the black community generally or the Islam community in particular. We need to learn the bitter lessons of history here. We know in times of very difficult economic circumstances, people tend to try and focus the blame on groups of people who they see are different from them. We must not allow that to happen. Of course, we should allow free speech. We should allow people to express their views so that we can highlight, we can shine a light on how stupid their ideas are. But clearly, allowing people who have extremist views, Islamophobic views, to march into strongly Muslim areas is dangerous and provocative, and I would be putting pressure as Mayor of London on the Commissioner of Police to prevent those sorts of marches. Yes, they can protest in other places, they can have a static demonstration, but going into Muslim areas is likely to cause division and violence, and it should not be allowed.
Do you think our politicians should be wary of speaking so frequently, using that sort of rhetoric, which I know Breivik himself has said has been part of his inspiration? You know, you've got even our Prime Minister talking about the consequences of multiculturalism.
You know, my partner was in Oslo when Breivik's bomb went off, and he felt the ground shake. You know, this is a personal issue for me. We cannot allow that sort of extremism. And unfortunately, the way that mainstream politicians even talk about people who are refugees, for example, the way that some mainstream politicians talk about Islam is dangerous and divisive. It gives succor to these people who want to see Islam destroyed. I have publicly said that London is a much better place for having a strong Muslim community. And I was the police spokesman after the 7th of July bombings, and when a journalist said, "Is this the result of Islamic terrorism?" I said, as far as I'm concerned, the term Islamic terrorism is a contradiction in terms, because that is what I honestly believe.
Now, let's move on to housing. Housing You've spoken about housing as a key issue on your agenda. You will be aware that in many high Muslim populated areas, especially the inner city boroughs such as Tower Hamlets or Newham, the levels of poverty are among the highest in the UK. There are too many stories of families trapped on welfare dependency, people who are being forced to live in the most desperate of housing conditions with damp rooms and overcrowding. Housing benefit, tragically, upon which so many of the most impoverished Muslim families depend, was capped by this coalition government, resulting in the boroughs such as Newham, as you may have read in the papers recently, being forced to export 500 of their families north to Stockport, isn't it? To the Midlands. One Labour MP, a former housing minister, called this ethnic cleansing and accused the government of directly of wanting Muslims out of central London, saying that the policies were designed to drive ethnic minorities out of the capital and to stop the poor from having children. Is she justified in her remarks? And what will you specifically be doing as head of the, I think you'll be taking on the role as head of the new building authority, will you, to protect the most vulnerable within the capital, in particular those in the Muslim community?
Okay, the first thing to say is I think this is a very cynical approach by Newham Council, scaremongering deliberately ahead of local elections to try and to create a distorted picture of actually what is going on. The second thing to say is I have broken ranks here with the coalition government, and I have said that because of the cost of housing in London is so much higher than it is anywhere else in the country, there needs to be a London-specific housing benefit cap, because that is the reality in London. So it needs to be a lot higher than it does in other parts of the country, simply to take account of the fact that housing costs are so much higher in London. But the most positive response to this problem is to build more homes. And I and the Liberal Democrats on the London Assembly have the most ambitious target to build 360,000 new homes over the next 10 years. We've identified brownfield sites, not green spaces, not back gardens, but brownfield sites where 360,000 new homes can be built in London. Now, you know, from May, the Mayor of London will be the biggest landowner in London. Take the cost of the land out of the equation, you can build homes at 40% of the market cost, and that means you can rent them for 40% of the market rate. I want a massive social house building programme, more ambitious than any other candidate in this election. You know, the others will talk about affordable housing, which might be affordable if you're on a six-figure salary like Ken Livingstone and Boris Johnson are on, but ordinary people can't afford this so-called affordable housing. We need more council houses in old language, and we need them not just 1 and 2 bedroom flats, we need large houses. And I was very pleased to visit a housing association in Islington that have built 5 and 6 bedroom homes, social housing for people in real need. That's the sort of programme that the London Liberal Democrats are proposing. It is the most ambitious. I honestly believe every Londoner, no matter what their circumstances, what their background is, should have a decent place to live that they can genuinely afford.
Well, just 2 points on that issue. One, you hinted at the suggestion of a cap. Now, there is the power within your remit to introduce a subsidy that would provide such a cap. I know that 1 or 2 of the other candidates are talking about certain subsidies on other issues. Are you saying that you may think about introducing some sort of subsidy which would therefore bring about a sort of London waiting for rent? Is that on your cards?
What we need to do, I mean, the Mayor of London has the biggest personal mandate, more people voting for him or her than any other politician in Western Europe, apart from the President of France. That is extreme amount of political power. And the argument is inescapable. When you look at the housing costs in London compared with anywhere else, it is so obvious that you need a London-specific housing cap above the national cap, and I will be making that point to the national government to make sure that they foot the bill, not Londoners, they foot the bill to have this higher cap on housing allowance.
And finally, on that point, did you disagree with the sentiments of the former Labour housing minister who felt that this was a deliberate strategy of ethnic cleansing in our inner cities?
I don't see that at all. I mean, the coalition have a point. There are people who are in low-paid jobs who are having to move further and further out of London in order to find somewhere that they can afford to live, whereas people on housing benefits are being able to stay in those inner city areas. That doesn't sound quite fair. But that does not excuse the fact that we need a higher level for the limit on housing allowance in London than we do elsewhere in the country.
Moving on, employment, jobs, or should I say unemployment and lack of jobs. You've spoken about the need to create more jobs in the capital. You're probably aware that Muslim men are 4 or 5 more times more likely to be unemployed than the average in this city and across the rest of the UK. Muslim women are 75% unemployed across Britain. In many London boroughs, these figures are the same, as particularly in boroughs such as Tower Hamlets, where ironically it's the home for the largest wealth centre in the country, Canary Wharf. Mm-hmm. Do you think that the apprenticeship schemes being proposed are enough, or do you recognise that there's actually a very serious case of discrimination impacting on this particular community?
This is a bit like stop and search, which I know we're going to come on to later. But if you take each individual decision, whether to employ somebody or not, the employer can justify their decision on objective grounds. But when you actually when you aggregate up the decisions, you see that there is discrimination in the job market, and that needs to be tackled. How do we tackle that? Well, what we do, it's called positive action. We have to offer training specifically to those groups who suffer from unemployment disproportionately to make sure that they become irresistible in terms of when they are compared with other candidates. The employer has no choice but to take them on, because on any objective measure they are better candidates than the other candidates. I am absolutely committed to equality. I have been throughout my police career, and I have now broadened out into other areas. I'm absolutely passionate about this. We have to create a level playing field for all Londoners. And if we see discrimination in the job market, or we see discrimination in any other aspect of society in London, we have to take headlong action against those issues. If we can prove employers are deliberately discriminating against people because they are Muslim, then of course that is illegal, and we need to make sure the law is enforced, and we need to give support to those people who wish to take test cases against particular employers. But on the positive side, we need to make sure that Muslim people are given more training so that they have the skills that employers want to make them more employable.
Well, talking about empowering and more training, it's somewhat ironic that the statistics show that huge swathes of the Muslim community face an additional problem of language. That sure. In some cases you have as many as 30% of some communities who are not, where English is a second or third language and very poorly spoken. And this is, I think most people would agree, one of the largest barriers to employment for them. Now, remarkably, our government cut the support to language courses, and at this particular time it sounds like an extraordinary stroke to have been played by a government that talks in terms of people becoming stakeholders in our society. What would the Mayor do about that particular issue?
We have to restore free language courses for people who really want to learn English. There is no point in extremists, even mainstream politicians, complaining about refugees, about complaining about people not being integrated with society, when they withdraw the means by which those people can become more integrated into society. Because, speaking English really does help to break down barriers and helps people to communicate and integrate with each other. So it is not just on the employment front, although that of course is a very important issue for employers, that an employee can speak English, but generally in terms of integration, in terms of diffusing tension, it is absolutely essential that we invest in language courses.
So what will the Mayor's office be doing specifically on this issue?
Well, we need to see what money is available within the Mayor's own resources, and then clearly we need to put pressure on local authorities as well. I mean, surely people can see the benefits of making sure that those who want to can learn the English language in terms of creating a more harmonious, a more peaceful community in London. And that is my top priority. I want, after 4 years of Brian Paddick as mayor, for people to look back and say London is a more civilised place where people get along with each other better. Getting people to speak English is a big part of that.
So, but let me just clear on that point before we move on. That sounds to me more of a lobbying role rather than an active role. Are you going to, is it one of your intentions to put money towards courses and
what we need to do is we need to see what the need is and how much money that would cost and what money is available, what savings we can make in other areas in order to pay for these courses. But it is a lobbying job with central government, it's a lobbying job with local authorities as well. But it is absolutely essential that we restore the funding if we can, that the government has withdrawn. No wonder, there has been unrest on the streets if this is the sort of attitude of central government.
Talking about unrest on the streets, we got there in the end. Police and crime is our next topic. You will have witnessed the results recently of the trials of the killers of Stephen Lawrence. Nearly 20 years after the murder took place, and in some ways the more compelling issue was not the brutal act against a vulnerable, innocent young man, but the racism in the Metropolitan Police, which ensured that his family had to wait all this time and against all odds to ensure that justice was done. There have been calls for another Macpherson inquiry, Macpherson-style inquiry, in light of the recent incidents, including the killing of Mark Duggan, which led to the riots that you referred to, or the racist abuse accorded by a young man while he was in police custody. I know that you are proposing to take on the mantle of the chair of the police authority. Will you be instigating a new independent inquiry into racism in the police, which I know people like Doreen Lawrence has called for?
Several things here. There was another victim on the night that Stephen Lawrence was killed. That was Dwayne Brooks. He was with Stephen when he was killed. Dwayne is a good friend of mine. He's now a Liberal Democrat councillor, and we have been working together on these issues. And I went with Dwayne Brooks when he gave evidence at the Old Bailey in that trial that led to the successful conviction, is the first thing to say. The second thing to say is I want an independent commissioner for standards for the Metropolitan Police. This person will set the standards for the police, the moral standards, a code of ethics for the police that they need to abide by, and that independent commissioner will oversee internal discipline issues such as the allegations of racism that we've heard, to make sure that they are thoroughly and properly investigated. The particular issue that Doreen Lawrence is concerned about is that there may have been corruption involved around the first investigation, and we need to get to the bottom of that. We understand there is a secret internal police report that outlines what who investigated that issue, but we don't know what the results of that investigation are. I, as Mayor of London, become the Police and Crime Commissioner for London. I set the priorities for the police, I hold the police to account, I set the budget for the police, and I can order the Commissioner to hand over that secret investigation to Doreen Lawrence so that she can see exactly what corruption was going on there. I think that's a much more effective
Is that a precursor to a more thorough independent inquiry? Because we don't know what's in that secret
What
report.
we need to do, what I have pledged to do is to set up a mayor's inquiry into racism in the Metropolitan Police. We don't need the permission of the Home Secretary. The Mayor has the power and the authority to say, okay, as the head of the police, I can hold an independent public investigation into this. I can call all the necessary witnesses. I can order the police to hand over the necessary documents, and that is what I will do.
Now, stop and search, another component, an issue which I know has been a burning one amongst the viewers of this channel, amongst the Muslim community. It's proven, has it not, to be ineffective and discriminate in its implementation, with people from ethnic minorities being up to 42 times more likely than white people to be stopped. Officers in England and Wales used the Terrorism Act powers to search 124,687 people between 2007 and 8. Those searches, only 1% of them ended up in any sort of arrest. Now, in your opinion, is sus an acceptable policy for UK police as it's been known? And is ethnic profiling justified?
The first thing to say is sus was a criminal offence which has been repealed, but I know people refer to stop and search in that way. Some police officers are stereotyping black people as criminals and stereotyping Muslim people as terrorists. That is completely unacceptable. I mean, they just don't get it. You know, the overwhelming majority of Muslim people are peace-loving people, people who adhere strictly to their religion, and yet they are being picked on as if they are criminals. It is absolutely crazy. And in the same way, if you picked a young black man at random in Brixton Road, they are more likely to be a victim of crime than they are to be a perpetrator. I wrote a report in 2004 when I was at Scotland Yard saying we need to end this discriminatory use of stop and search against people because of the way they look, and we need to target it effectively on criminals. And now, and my boss put that report in the bin. Well, as the Police and Crime Commissioner, I can finally implement that report, make it far more accurate in terms of it being focused on criminals, and make it far less discriminatory.
Now, finally, I want to just touch on the issue of engagement with youth in particular. Far too often I hear young people saying they don't really want to get bothered or involved in the elections because those politicians are not really interested in us. Do you think something needs to be done to change that? And are you, as Mayor, planning any major initiatives that will, if you like, provoke young people to become involved in politics?
Well, I've been demonstrating that I am not like traditional politicians. I have been out talking to young people. We went to B6 Sixth Form College, for example, in Hackney, and entered into debate with the young people there. So that's what we need to do. The Mayor actually needs to go out and meet with young people, listen to them directly to hear what their concerns are. And young people need to do something as well. The reason politicians traditionally have not listened to young people, because young people have traditionally been the least likely to vote in elections. You have got to get out there and vote. You can keep the BNP out of the London Assembly by going out and vote Liberal Democrat on the London Assembly on May the 3rd. And you can make politicians listen to you if you go out and use your vote. If politicians know that Muslims are very likely to vote, that young people are very likely to vote, they are much more likely to listen to you. So please, whatever you do, go out and vote on Thursday, May the 3rd.
On that important note, Brian Paddick, Liberal Democrat, mayoral candidate for London, thank you very much for joining us on Islam Channel. Thank you.